Delit turned his wrist around, his injured wrist, a blue ring around where he thought he'd snapped the bone. He can feel his system protesting by the amount of pain that sits beneath the bruise. It feels like it's broken, but the other half of his body has got lighter purple bruises from the excruciating methods of exercise that were of lesser harm to Delit than what Duncan had to do when his father taught him how to be a man. The sound of the principal's voice, nothing more than an atmospheric vibration. Principal Olive. I have reason to believe that you two had been wrestling each other. Look at you, Delit. Look at you. Darius's mouth twitched. His wrist rested on his leg. Principal Olive. Not only have you been targeting Duncan, but you've become more violent ever since that day in the hallway. What has gotten into you two? I should have believed Duncan. Darius. Principal Olive, what are you talking about? Principal Olive. I'm talking about you two. I would like to suspend you, but I don't think the council table would allow it. So instead, I'll be giving you 4 hours detention where you can reflect in the presence of one another. I demand that you leave Duncan alone, and if I catch either one of you approaching him, I will have you placed in separate classrooms. Am I clear? Darius. You're about as clear as a puddle of mud. What are you even going on about? Principal Olive. Do you remember your visit with Duncan? He would not look at me. He could not explain his side. That is unlike someone as violent and egotistical of him. Do you, Delit, remember when you first came into my office with Duncan? You had hit him multiple times and were yet to have evidence for your own reasoning. You had none, and Duncan was willing to confirm that you had attacked him. Duncan had come to me during recess to say that he broke your wrist, Darius. A little strange for someone who could have chosen to run away before the teacher came back with another student, who, may I just add, is your friend, Mr. Darius. And Elliot can't even recall if it was Duncan who hit you or Delit. He claims Duncan was standing behind Delit when he last saw. Both of you have been out of control since you met Duncan. Can either one of you explain to me what this behavior is? Delit just shook his head, knowing full well that it was a question, but he shook his head to indicate his lack of awareness on the matter. Darius. You think we did this to each other? Do you know how stupid that sounds? After Duncan literally admitted to breaking my arm? Darius raises his cast in exaggeration. Principal Olive. I cannot let my sixth sense go unchecked. You boys are a danger to one another, and Duncan's behavior is strange. Darius. It's strange because he's starting to realize that he's sick in the head. Principal Olive. Hold your temper and watch your mouth, Mr. Darius. I am this close to writing you up for counseling with Duncan. Darius was glaring underneath his shrub of bangs, but it went unnoticed. He pushed his chair out and dug his chin in his chest. Delit attempted to follow, but the principal stopped him. Principal Olive. Delit, I do remember your scuffle with Duncan, so I would recommend you avoid him just as much as Darius should. Delit nodded, as if it's all it would take for this conversation to end. Acting like a foreigner that can't speak English, he feels like a foreigner that can't speak English. As far as his memory would allow him to recall, the principal addressed the fight that he had with Duncan, and now wants him to apologize, is what Delit thought, of course. He had no idea where he'd have to go in order to find Duncan. He assumed back the usual road where Duncan walks home. He found him halfway there, grabbing onto his shoulders and pushing him back. Duncan turned around, holding his breath with as much patience as he could manage for the sake of Delit's safety. He turned around, glaring him down just for Delit to look like a pitiful, cold, wet, injured dog. Delit. Wait! Duncan, I need to say I'm sorry. Duncan. No, that's not how this works. Get out of my face, Delit. Duncan. No, wait, Darius. Okay. There you are. Had to know that you would just leave me and stab me in the back like that. Delit. What? Darius, where did you come from? Darius jumps out in front of the road. He shoves Duncan back with his good arm. Duncan's frustration boiling to the surface. The expression he makes is a deadlock on a predator's cage about to give in. Delit. Darius, no! Darius. Shut up, Delit. You don't know what's good for you. Delit. No, Darius, Duncan's dangerous. Darius. Exactly, you idiot. Darius shoved Delit back, which is then when Duncan reacted out of the defense of his loyalty to Delit by grabbing hold of Darius's throat while he was distracted by Delit. He lifted him off the ground before getting kicked in the torso by Darius's sneaker. He threw him to the ground and yanked at his ankles like he previously did and ripped his body off the ground, dangling him upside down like a monkey playing with a banana. Delit. Duncan, stop! He's got a broken arm! It's not fair! Duncan was about to drop Darius if Darius didn't throw his fist in Duncan's knee. He threw him on his back. Darius rolled onto his knees and jumped onto his feet as if uninjured. He then threw his hand in Duncan's face. He expected a fist, but he got a handful of Darius's claws. He shred past skin and even went over the previous scratches he left on Duncan's face. Duncan almost slipped backwards, horrified, traumatized, and amplified with the fear of several scratches just located on the side of his face, like the feeling of his father's knife peeling past the delicate surface of his skin. This wasn't a blunt object that would shatter his bone. This was much worse. Acid infection, liquefied horror running out of an open wound. Darius jumped on Duncan like an alley cat, but he ducked down, trying to slip past Darius. He choked him with his wrist and dragged Duncan almost halfway down. Duncan shoved him against a wall, crushing him in between his muscular arm and the concrete wall of the alley. He flipped around before Darius could regain his composure. He punched him in the mouth, knuckles first. His lips spat out the blood, but the cuts looked horrific, repeating this action by repeatedly thrusting fists left and right, trying to kick him off his feet. Delit was screaming behind him before Duncan changed tactics. Duncan's hands wrapped around Darius's throat as Darius clawed at his fingers. His hands were shaking, his breath was pacing, and his heart was thumping. His veins were bulging with warm blood rushing through his system. He felt like he was choking himself, digging his own grave and signing a contract with death. All because of Darius's fingers clawing in between the force of his hands, wrapped around his throat. Darius smacked Duncan in the face. He kept his hands on his wounds. Duncan plunged back, jumping like he just burnt his fingers. He tried to step back, but ended up sprinting down the alleyway, making haste with his escape, not to avoid the incident, but to avoid Darius. Vivid hallucinations of his father whispering his name in the cold midnight air as he was breathless, almost drowning his face in a mud puddle, allowing his father to step on his back to keep from being found, running as if he would ever be faster than his father. Delit felt uncomfortable to reach out and touch Darius. He spat the blood out on the pavement of the alley, his teeth intact to Delit's surprise, his lips looking bigger by the second. His fingers were shaking. He had Duncan's skin underneath his fingernails, his quivering, plump lips twisting into a smile. He crushed his hands into fists and whispered something only he could hear. Darius, I knew it. Delit plunged onto his knees, grabbing hold of Darius's shoulders. He grabbed him and crushed him against his chest. Darius patted Delit's back with his broken wrist hand and started drooling blood on the back of his shirt, the liquid dipping underneath the fabric, but Delit couldn't feel it as he was focused on keeping Darius calm. Darius had his eyes set on the back of Delit's sneakers, his full attention drawn onto the expression that Duncan gives him when he corners him. Delit hopped Darius back home. They entered his mother's front door and Delit locked it behind them. He started dragging him towards the bathroom that was covered in the kind of light-shaded vanilla tiles that makes blood about as obvious as a neon light in the dark. He sat him down in the tub and rummaged around in the bathroom cupboards for the medikit. He threw it out on the floor and ripped open a bag of cotton balls. First, he took Darius's jaw and turned him over to the faucet. He opened the water and forced him to wash out his mouth. He dipped the cotton balls in a disinfectant and shoved it in his mouth. Darius bit Delit's finger with the third one. He hissed for a second and pulled his finger back, but all he could feel was the clattering of his ribs like piano keys by a professional composer. But his heart rate was not professionally composed, getting dangerously close to suffering a panic attack. He leaned him down in the tub and grabbed the drain plug. He opened the faucet, allowing warm water to start running down the tub, sinking through the fabric of Darius's clothes. He tugged at the end of his shirt and pulled it over his head. Delit's heart would have landed him in the hospital if he didn't stop every several seconds to let his lungs fill back up and push back out. The water started lifting in the tub. He grabbed a hold of Darius's pants, pulling them halfway down towards the knees. Darius grabbed hold and pulled him down to his feet. Floating around in the water, Delit picked it up out of the bathtub and started carrying it over to the towel rack. He almost completely undressed apart from the boxers, but Delit's glaring eye contact convinced Darius not to tempt him by exposing him to something so explicit. Darius gave Delit a bloody smile, a toothy grin that looked like something out of a back alley incident. Delit turned his head away, trying to stop himself from bursting out in tears. You can only imagine how much it hurts. All that blood running down from his nostrils and towards his chin. Delit put his hands close to his mouth, feeling on his teeth. He wanted to pass out in front of Darius, but he kept his head on his shoulders for Darius's sake. Delit. Oh no, Darius. Could you check on your water? I gotta go make sure Duncan's fine. Darius lunged out of the water, his hands reaching out to Delit. He pulled him down, his fingers clawing into his shirt. He had this desperate grip on him. Darius, leave him, he's fine. He should get hit by a bus on his way there. Darius's words, almost completely muffled by the cotton balls, was still translatable to Delit as he gave him that sorrowful expression. Delit, Darius, no, I need you. Leave him, he'll be fine. Delit couldn't see past Darius's bangs, but he knows full well that if the roles were reversed, Darius wouldn't even have carried him home. He would have walked away and expected Delit to crawl his way back home. That alone makes Delit a little frustrated, but he'd be lying to himself if he didn't admit that he somehow understood why Darius behaves the way he does. But with his teeth clenched like that, all Darius could see was the crimson splatter of pure masculine teenage violence. It would be cruel to leave Duncan in distress. He leaned back, pulling Darius's fine hand and his cast-wrapped hand off of his shirt. He pulled back and then walked backwards towards the door. Darius's arms were dangling out of the tub. The lips were cut, spitting blood from his mouth. He spat it out on the bathroom tiles. Darius, then just leave! It pushed Delit to make the rough-cut decision of dashing out the front door. He was running the regular route that would lead him to Duncan's house, but then took a wrong turn, almost accidental if his intuition didn't play a universal part. He heard shuffling off in the distance, and instead of finding Duncan shuffling around in the dark, he found a familiar friend. Delit, Hank? Hank's head was hunched forward over on his hand, his jaw remaining locked in place thanks to the leverage of his palm. He turned around, a black eye catching Delit in return, then the bodily bruises that spread like chalk dust. He fell into Delit's embrace and grabbed hold of his shirt. He could barely speak, just blood getting spat out from his mouth. The only reason Delit recognized him was because of his hair color. Delit, oh my goodness, I can't hear you. He patted his shoulders like he was trying to reassure him. Delit grabbed him around the waist and dragged him like he couldn't walk. When they were out of the alley and into the streets, he didn't know which direction to pull Hank except towards his house. He kicked the door open and dropped him on the carpet, resting his back against what he thought would be better than the side of the road. He ran towards the kitchen and opened the fridge with a bottle of antibiotics, which was the same kind used on Delit to drug him so he wouldn't focus on the pain. His face was cut up, but Delit's focus was on Hank's lips, swollen like Darius's, teeth shredding through the sensitive skin and tearing it apart, which tends to cause infection, turning perfectly natural kissers into fish lips. He stuffed a cotton ball and squeezed it in between Hank's teeth into his mouth. Hank's mouth was agape, unlike Darius. He allowed for Delit to house the cotton and squeeze it into the back of his mouth, keeping his hands on Delit's shoulders as he was doing this, his pupils rolling in and out of his sockets from time to time, making Delit's spine tingle with chills. Delit, just close your mouth, Hank. Delit climbed off of Hank, shaking his jaw a bit. Hank bit down on the cotton balls. The numbing feeling was going to make him a little delusional, but it would take the pain away like a good drug should. As for Duncan's path, hands, blood, teeth and mouth, hands, blood, teeth and mouth. He fell on the floor of his bedroom. He was so angry and so distraught at the same time, feeling his fingers twitching like he wanted to hit something, but something was wrong. He felt it in his core, like twisted knots that were clogging up his throat like salted pretzels swallowed whole, filling his throat up with particles, mucus running down his nostrils. He grabbed a hold of his nose. His tears brought his father's fingers between his hair, face thrust forward into the kitchen counter before getting a backhand to the side of the face. The screaming and then the belt. Little sparkling speckles of spikes decorated across the belt like glitter before getting hit in the face like whipping a cow or a horse. It smacked him across the face, his eye, and then the corner of his mouth. His father grabbed his jaw and pinned him against the wall. His hands were on his father's wrists, screaming, crying, begging him to let go. The crying made him clench his teeth, crushing them back in his gums till the pink flesh turned white. His gums might have been white, but his face was red-hot, fuming like radioactive waste, intoxicating and dangerous. He breathed into Duncan's face, his mouth almost touching his ear, clenched teeth shouting at him. The screaming was just muffled, too muffled to even be present in the moment. So he just chose to ignore it because it wouldn't help him anyway. He took a knife out of his back pocket and pressed it on the tip of Duncan's earlobe. He whispered in his ear, his teeth remaining clenched. Duncan never remembered a word coming out of his father's mouth because Duncan gave his father fish lips with his fist. He shuts his eyes, his hands still shaking at his sides. He dipped his head in his lap and proceeded to rake his fingers through his hair like a scalp massage, trying to soothe his inner child, like calming that scared child. Before the scratching grew more aggressive, his fingers shaped like claws, his nails digging into the skin of his scalp. His knees shifted to press his forehead down against the floor. It hurts his head, but it felt better than thinking, remembering, and contemplating.